Hello there and welcome. It's Psychic Cynthia here, Spiritual Psychic Cynthia Killian. And I just wanted to let you know that Mercury's about ready to go retrograde again. Yes, it's true. At least we didn't start off the new year right with the Mercury retrograde, but actually Mercury will enter its pre-retrograde storm. So that's the slowdown before the retrograde. It's going to move into that on Monday, January 10th. 2022. So a lot of us who follow astrology and who are actually really into it and do it professionally, we pretty much treat the pre-retrograde storm as the start of the retrograde, even though it's not the official start, but it already kind of starts to act like it. And especially if you're sensitive to energies, even if you don't follow astrology normally, if you're sensitive to energies, you're going to start to notice the slowdown and the equilibrium getting off even before the retrograde starts. So the beginning of the storm is on Monday, January 10th. That's the pre-storm. Now the retrograde proper runs from, I believe it's Friday, January 14th up until February 3rd, 2022. And again, that's 3 weeks. So what to expect during Mercury retrograde? Just a basic guideline is that when Mercury's in retrograde, oh my gosh, the communication breakdowns there. You know, there's so many increased misunderstandings. So you really need to slow down and review what you're going to say, or how you're going to say it, or you know, how you're going to communicate it. You know, you can't just for most people, you're not going to be able to flow as naturally as usual, and it's just really easy to be misunderstood during this time. So, you know, whether it's with your family, with your, you know, intimate partner, or your work, you know, especially with work, because Mercury does rule business and commerce. It's one of the planets, I should say. So, yes, you know, do take the time to slow down and to really reflect before speaking. All retrogrades are signposts from the universe that we are to reflect. You know, it's generally, Mercury retrograde is more of a time for reflecting and reviewing than moving forward. Okay, so it's very difficult to move forward during Mercury retrograde. You can do it, but mainly you're going to see more success moving forward with the projects you already started, or moving forward with self-care and nurturing, you know, or somehow filling your cup. These are good Mercury retrograde activities, but there are breakdowns and misunderstandings, breakdowns in communications, breakdowns in technology increase, typically speaking, during Mercury retrograde, especially this one, because the retrograde is starting at 10 degrees Aquarius. Now, as the energies move, it's going to move back into the sign of Capricorn during the retrograde, but I suppose we'll probably see some tech breakdowns, and I've noticed one of my computers has been making some weird sounds lately. So yeah, a lot of times if you have something on the edge getting ready to go out, whether it's a computer or a car or a hot water tank, whatever it is, a lot of times it will, you know, die during the Mercury retrograde if it's already been going out. So just be aware of that, and so it can be a good time to repair and replace, even though the general rule is do not make major purchases during Mercury retrograde, and do not sign binding contracts, long-term binding contracts. But I have found that it can be a good time to replace things that we have been thinking about replacing, or things that have been, you know, on the fritz, about ready to go. And hey, like if your hot water tank goes out in the middle of winter, what are you going to do? Or anytime you need hot water. Okay, so, and you need a car, right? A lot of us need a car. It depends on where you live, but like where I live, getting around public transportation is not easy. So, yeah, sometimes you just have to do it. But if you don't have to do it, you know, if you don't have to make a major purchase, I would not recommend doing it during this time. Instead, I would spend these, you know, next few weeks as a time to gather up information. And retrogrades are good times to think and contemplate and gather up information. The reason they're not the best times, this in particular, Mercury retrograde, is not the best time to push forward with new initiatives, is because usually you don't have all the information during the retrograde that you're going to need to make a really clear, good decision. So if you can, wait a beat on major things. It doesn't mean you have to just stand still and do nothing. And I think you can think of, incremental change and moving forward in small ways. And, if you want to start something new, just make sure there's, you have to have flexibility, okay? You have to be willing to be flexible. Number one rule in Mercury retrograde is be willing to be flexible. Be willing to change your plans at the last minute. Always have a plan B, a plan C, and a plan D for anything major during Mercury retrograde. You have to think about worst case scenarios. I mean, not in a way that you're dwelling on them, but, if you're trying to move forward majorly, when the universe is saying this is not a time to move forward majorly, well, you're going to have a backup plan, okay? It is a great time for inner growth. Mercury retrograde is always a wonderful time to meditate, to go deeper in your communion with your guides, especially a Mercury retrograde that is crossing the signs of Aquarius and Capricorn, because Aquarius is a spiritual visionary. It's the humanitarian, and Capricorn in its highest energy is the spiritual architect, the ascended masters. So I believe that some of this inner world communication could be heightened for those who wish to tap into it. Intuition could be heightened. The drawback is that clarity is not as easy on a mental level, so you might get things intuitively, but then you might not understand how to process it. So it's a good time to seek out guidance, okay? It's a good time to ask for a second or a third opinion with anything. Again, especially with something that could be major or life-changing, or, major medical stuff or major purchases. Don't disregard this guidance. I've just heard so many stories and seen so many people who just pushed ahead anyway, and they were in a hurry and they didn't get all the information they needed during Mercury retrograde, and they made terrible mistakes that had impact on their lives for years to come sometimes. I mean, sometimes it's just a small thing like, oh, I signed a bad cell phone contract and now I'm stuck with it for 2 years. But do you really want that? No. Okay. So again, always give yourself a little breathing space during Mercury retrograde as you're moving forward. Always give yourself time to have a higher perspective, to look at things, because, we don't make good decisions when we're in a hurry, and we're just trying to go forward. And I get it. Sometimes you need to make a decision. So do that, but take the time you need to get the information. If you don't have the information, or you're not sure, or you just want to be really sure, seek a second and perhaps a third opinion too during this time. Good opinions, from people that have, wisdom in the areas that you're seeking. I mean, if you need help with your car, you probably wouldn't ask your psychic, unless your psychic is a mechanic, which is not me. Okay. For example, if you need help with your finances, I wouldn't ask, your friends whose finances are totally, in crap. I mean, unless they happen to be good at advising others, maybe they are, I don't know. But generally you want to ask somebody who demonstrates and knows something about the field that you're interested in. So anyway, yeah, there will be an increase. Usually there is an increase in communication breakdowns and technology and appliances, and traveling is a little bit more challenging during this time. Most people say do not travel at this time, and I would say it's not the best time for taking major trips, but you could find that taking a short day trip or just shorter trips in general could be very refreshing to your soul. So yes, get out if you can. Just allow yourself a lot of time. Don't be in a hurry, and then please, if you're traveling, check your tires, have your car checked out, or if you're on a plane, listen, if you got to get on a plane and they say, hey, we got to work on it for a while, maybe you don't get on that plane, okay? I mean, generally, Mercury retrograde is not a dangerous time, but just be aware, if things seem like they're going to break down, they probably will during Mercury retrograde. There's a physical phenomenon for that. It's because, there's a different flow in gravity when these retrogrades happen, and it puts a lot of pressure on the appliances and just even the human body. And that's why there's more accidents during Mercury retrograde. So watch your step, be more aware. Again, don't be in a hurry. Slow down, take your time, Be more thoughtful. Think things through. Give yourself more time. Give yourself permission to do less. That's another good rule. Don't try to take on too much now, because if you do, you will burn out. There's too much cellular gravitational pressure during a Mercury retrograde to try to be Superman or Superwoman. And if you follow these rules, it doesn't have to be too bad, or guidelines. They're not rules. They're just guidelines. Everything I say is a guideline. Ultimately, you have to be guided by the inner self. So if you follow these guidelines and tap into your own inner consciousness, your inner I am self, the higher self, you'll get through it okay. And before you know it, we'll be out of it again. This retrograde runs officially January 14th to February 3rd. Remember, there's a little bit of a pre-retrograde storm ahead of time and then a post-after. I believe the post-retrograde storm, oh, I'd have to check my notes, but I think it ends around February 9th. So, you know, this is the time window. Basically, January 10th, when the pre-retrograde storm starts, all the way to February 9th. This whole, I don't know how many weeks that is, that's 5 or 6 weeks or somewhere in there. This is a good time for applying this guidance I've given you. And then especially during the retrograde proper, those 3 weeks of January 14th through February 3rd. Alrighty, well, use this time well and wisely, hopefully to get rejuvenated and to go within and slow down. You know, if you want to get something done, fine. Just do one thing more deeply. You know, 1 or 2 things, okay? And there'll be time for speeding up later. All right, wishing you all a happy new year, and let's have as happy as possible and a sane Mercury retrograde. Until next time, bright blessings.